Japan makes it official that it'll start releasing wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant as early as this coming Thursday, 12 years after the disaster. The South Korean government sees Tokyo's water discharge plan as having no technical problems, adding it'll ask them to stop the process immediately if the release does not fall in line with its original plan. The IAEA says it'll maintain an on-site presence at Fukushima Daiichi. Amid a string of recent heinous crimes in Korea, the government and the ruling party map out a financial support plan for victims and specialized prisons to ramp up the rehabilitation of perpetrators. It's August 22nd, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Japan sets this coming Thursday as the date for starting to release wastewater from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant amid criticism from local fishing groups and nearby countries. More than 1 million tons will be released into the Pacific over the next 30 years as preparations are underway. Bae-eun-ji starts us off.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has said the country will go forward with the release of wastewater on Thursday, August 24th, if they encounter no obstacles. A total of about 1.3 million tons of wastewater will be discharged from the destroyed nuclear power plant in Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean over the next 3 decades. The decision was made after the Japanese government held a cabinet meeting on Tuesday morning to discuss the issue.
As for the specific release date, it is expected to be August 24th, weather and sea conditions permitting.
Announcing the plan, Prime Minister Kishida said he believes there has been support and understanding from a wide range of regions and countries based on scientific evidence from the International Atomic Energy Agency. The IAEA, the United Nations nuclear watchdog, approved the discharge last month, saying that it finds the plans to be consistent with international safety standards. Prime Minister Kishida also asked the operator of the power plant, Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, to prepare for the discharge swiftly. In response, TEPCO said it has begun the preparations needed, starting with the transfer of the first batch of treated water from storage tanks into a facility on Tuesday morning. The company said it expects a total of 31,200 tons to be discharged by next March, and explained that this is about 3% of the total amount. TEPCO plans to use a purification system called the ALPS to remove radioactive materials with the exception of tritium that's difficult to separate from water. It will then mix with seawater to dilute it before releasing into the ocean through an underwater pipe that's about 1 kilometer long. Japan's latest decision comes just days after the leaders of South Korea, the US, and Japan held a historic summit as Seoul and Tokyo worked to resolve historical disputes and restore ties. Meanwhile, some Japanese media outlets have suggested that the reason Kishida is eyeing an early release within this month is to avoid the fishing season in Fukushima, which begins in September. It's been about 2 years since the Japanese government first announced its decision to discharge the water into the Pacific Ocean as storage space was running out. And it has been around 12 years since the Fukushima nuclear power plant was destroyed by a massive tsunami and earthquake on March 11, 2011. Beijing, Arirang News.
Responding to this, the South Korean government says the planned Fukushima water release has no scientific or technical issues. But it did say that it'll ask for an immediate halt to the release if things don't go as planned. This as Korea steps up monitoring for safety amid concerns at home. Choi Min-jung reports.
With Japan set to proceed with the release of Fukushima wastewater as soon as Thursday, the South Korean government has determined that there are no scientific or technical problems with the planned discharge. Speaking at a briefing on Tuesday afternoon, the First Deputy Chief of the Office for Government Policy Coordination, Park Gu-yeon, stressed that this, however, does not mean that the government accepts or supports the wastewater release.
Our government concluded today that we'll ask Japan to immediately stop the discharge if the actual process goes differently from what was planned, as it would threaten the safety and health of our people.
In order to enhance the transparency and reliability of the disposal, Park said South Korea has consulted with the IAEA and Japan about having Korean experts participate in the on-site inspection operated by the IAEA. The Korean government also asked Japan to immediately stop the release and notify the government if something unusual occurs. Lastly, South Korea has requested the sharing of real-time information for prompter, transparent monitoring. In response, Japan, in coordination with the IAEA, agreed to post relevant data online every hour with the information provided in Korean as well. To ease concerns, the government announced its future plans aimed at protecting the safety and health of people in Korea.
As we have done so far, our government will focus on the health and safety of the people and respond transparently and promptly while doing our best to minimize damage to fishers in the fisheries industry.
First, the government plans to significantly expand the scope of monitoring to include the waters near the Pacific Islands and the Northwest Pacific near Japan. Authorities also vowed to expand simulations using actual data obtained after the release to reflect what's really going on. The government has been judging that the impact of the release on domestic waters and marine products will not be significant. This comes as results from various simulations have shown that radioactive substances from the wastewater would flow into Korean waters several years later in a considerably diluted state. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The International Atomic Energy Agency vows to maintain an on-site presence at Fukushima Daiichi during and after releasing the water amid a mixed reaction from the international community, some expressing strong opposition. Shin Ha-young has the details. The International Atomic Energy Agency will review the situation during and after the discharge of Fukushima wastewater. Following the announcement by the Japanese government on Tuesday, the IAEA published a statement on its website saying that its staff on site will continue to monitor and assess the activities to ensure their ongoing alignment with safety standards, including on the day of the discharge starting and after. The agency has staff stationed in a Fukushima office that was opened last month, where South Korea will also send its experts. The IAEA experts there will directly observe the process of collecting wastewater samples. While regularly visiting related facilities, they will coordinate discussions between the IAEA and Tokyo Electric Power Company if any changes occur. It also plans to publish data for the use of the global community, including real-time monitoring information. An additional update will be provided as soon as the discharge begins. Unlike the United States, which has been supportive of the discharge, China has been expressing discontent over Japanese seafood even before the decision was made, saying that Japan has shown selfishness and had not fully consulted the international community. It reportedly began radiation checks on all seafood imports from Japan last month. Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee on Tuesday said he strongly opposes the decision, saying the city would immediately activate import controls on Japanese seafood. On the other hand, the European Union last month decided to remove its import restrictions on Japanese food that had been in place since the nuclear accident in 2011. Meanwhile, the environmental organization Greenpeace has criticized Japan's latest decision, arguing that it violates human rights in both Japan and the Pacific region and that it ignores the concerns of people, including fishermen. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News. President Yoon Suk-yeol has announced new names for key positions, and this includes a minister to lead in promoting the nation's export policies, hoping to revitalize the economy. In addition, with the current Chief Justice of the Supreme Court leaving in a month, he has nominated a conservative-leaning judge to the court. Kim Do-yeon has details.
President Yoon on Tuesday nominated former Minister of Office for Government Policy Coordination Bang Moon-gyu as his new Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy. Bang, a career civil servant in the country's treasury and finance sectors, has served in a number of key roles, including the CEO of the Export-Import Bank of Korea.
Amidst rapid changes in the global economy, uncertainties have grown in our economy's trade and investment environment, as well as in energy and resource policies. In times like these, I believe that strategic industrial policies are crucial.
Replacing him as the OPC minister will be Bang Ki-sun, who currently serves as the first Vice Minister of Economy and Finance. According to an official at the top office, both coming from the finance ministry, underscores the government's main focus of reviving the economy, with diplomacy and security issues being considered somewhat settled following the Camp David Trilateral Summit. Earlier the same day, the president nominated a new Chief Justice for the Supreme Court. Lee Gyun-young, a career judge, served at various courts, including the Seoul Central District Court and the Gwangju High Court. Lee, according to reports citing his past words and decisions, is regarded as a conservative. His appointment is subject to a National Assembly confirmation hearing, followed by a vote during a plenary session. If voted in, he will take up the position on September 24th, when the current Chief Justice Kim Myung-soo's term ends.
This judge has stood at the forefront of advancing the rights of vulnerable members of society, particularly through rulings that greatly expand the rights of people with disabilities, with a recognition for his contributions to disability rights.
The presidential office also announced 4 vice ministerial appointments, including Kim Hyung-yeol as the commissioner of the National Agency for Administrative City Construction. The change had been anticipated after investigations revealed that the Osong underpass flooding, which left 14 dead in July, was partly due to construction work led by the agency at a nearby riverbank. Meanwhile, as for the Korea Communications Commission Chief Lee Dong-kwan's confirmation, a presidential official said a re-request will be made on Tuesday for a new deadline, with the Assembly failing to come up with a report by Monday. If the second deadline is also missed, the president can proceed with the nominee's appointment. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Amid a string of recent heinous crimes in Korea, the authorities have come up with a comprehensive support plan for victims. And to root out senseless crimes, they are thinking of creating specialized prisons and adopting a life sentence without the chance of parole. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo has more.
As South Korea grapples with a series of violent crimes targeting random victims, the government and the ruling People Power Party have proposed measures to respond to these senseless acts aimed at preventing them. Lawmakers, the National Police Agency, and officials from various ministries, including Justice and Health, came together on Tuesday and announced a 3-part plan that also aimed at prioritizing the needs of the victims of such violence.
These measures are aimed at providing assistance and help for the victims.
The plan is to expand support for the victims, prevent violent crimes, and strengthen the punishment of those convicted. A so-called one-stop support service center will be established as soon as possible to provide comprehensive support for the victims and their family members suffering from physical and emotional trauma. There will also be expanded financial support for medical treatment. Victims can currently receive 15 million Korean won, or around $11,000 per year, up to a total of 50 million won, or around $37,000 over several years. They can receive additional support following a special review by the government. Now the government and the PPP are looking to provide more of such additional support, possibly covering all necessary expenses. To prevent such violent crimes, measures will be drawn up to hospitalize those with psychiatric disorders who are at risk of harming themselves or others. More collaborative response centers will be set up nationwide by police and regional administrations. Additionally, more surveillance cameras will be installed in high-risk neighborhoods. The government will also push to introduce life sentences without the chance of parole, as well as increase the sentences for serious crimes by at least 6 months and possibly up to 2 years or more. A special prison will be designated for serious felons with tighter restrictions and controls. In addition, the National Assembly will push legislation for the punishment of those threatening people with lethal weapons in public places and expand the release of photos of suspects along with their personal information. Also discussed was the possible easing of restrictions on the use of force by police facing suspected violent criminals. The meeting followed President Yoon Suk-yeol's order on Monday for Prime Minister Han Duck-soo to come up with measures to deal with the violent crime wave. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
North Korea has notified Japan that it'll launch a satellite sometime between this Thursday and the end of this month. This second launch attempt after its earlier failure looks like an apparent response to the ongoing South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises, while the regime marks its 75th founding anniversary next month. For more, here's our North Korean affairs correspondent Lee Hyun.
North Korea will likely launch a satellite between August 24th and 31st in the direction of the West Sea. The Japanese Coast Guard said that Pyongyang gave a notification early on Tuesday saying that it will designate 3 marine danger zones. These zones will include 2 areas in the West Sea and the eastern part of the Philippines Pacific coast. Kyodo News reported that the planned launch seems to be a retry of Pyongyang's military reconnaissance satellite launch in May. North Korea had notified Japan about that launch on May 29th and launched the satellite 2 days after that, but it failed as the rocket fell into the West Sea minutes after launch. North Korea's Aerospace Development Administration said that the newly built engine and fuel that had been used to launch the rocket were the reasons for the failure and pledged to try again soon. Experts say that May's launch was possibly affected by political issues, as there could have been pressure for North Korea to succeed in putting the satellite into orbit ahead of the so-called Victory Day in July.
This could indicate that North Korea has figured out the reason for the previous failure, so we might want to keep an eye on that. Pyongyang might have also targeted the Seoul-Washington joint military drills.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reportedly ordered officials to finish the technological preparation for a military spy satellite as one of the regime's top priorities for the second half of the year. South Korea's National Intelligence Service earlier last week said that the satellite will likely be launched in late August or early September to celebrate National Foundation Day next month. Meanwhile, following the notice, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida reportedly called on related ministries to cooperate in gathering information and said that Tokyo will closely work with Seoul and Washington on the matter. The Japanese Coast Guard has also issued an alert to warn seafarers. South Korea's Unification Ministry also condemned Pyongyang's plan, saying it is a clear violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. It also urged North Korea to immediately withdraw the plan. Lee Hyun, Arirang News.
In more than 3.5 years, North Korea's first international commercial flight has landed in Beijing. On Tuesday, the Air Koryo flight departed Pyongyang's Sunan International Airport and arrived at Beijing Capital International Airport. Although it's unknown whether any passengers were on board, it's been suggested that officials from North Korea's embassy in Beijing could be on the flight, as the embassy car was reportedly parked at the airport. A flight returning back to Pyongyang also appeared on the airport screen board, scheduled at 1:05 p.m. The exact number of passengers is unknown, but there was reportedly a long line of North Korean passengers to take the flight back to Pyongyang. In Moscow, airports in the Russian capital were briefly closed on Monday after spotting a drone hovering over the capital. Our Choi Soo-young with the details.
All airports in the Russian capital were temporarily closed on Monday local time as a drone was spotted over Moscow. The drone is believed to have been shot down on the outskirts of the city. According to Reuters and TASS News, a suspected unmanned aerial vehicle from Ukraine threw Moscow's airports into chaos, resulting in delays for all outgoing and incoming flights. Russia's defense ministry claimed that the drone was shot down, while Ukraine did not immediately comment on the incident. Meanwhile, during a visit to Denmark, Ukraine's President Zelensky stated on Monday local time at the Copenhagen Parliament that he is confident of Ukraine's victory.
Dear friends, today we are confident that Russia will lose this war. The main thing is what we prove with our victory, with our cooperation, what you prove supporting Ukraine.
On August 20th, Denmark and the Netherlands jointly announced they will support Ukraine with F-16 fighter jets as soon as certain conditions such as pilot training are met. Denmark revealed plans to provide a total of 19 aircraft, including 6 starting at the end of this year, with a further 8 in 2024 and 5 in 2025. Meanwhile, Russia's ambassador to Denmark, Vladimir Babin, said that Denmark's decision would further escalate the conflict. Russia's foreign minister also warned that Moscow considers F-16 fighter jets a nuclear threat. Cho Seung, Arirang News.
Seoul Metro will be introducing unlimited subway passes for the convenience of foreign tourists, the number of which have been increasing with the removal of COVID restrictions. Announced by the operator of the Seoul subway system on Sunday, the new passes allowing unlimited travel are expected to be issued before the end of the year. Considering that around 37% of foreign tourists stay in the city for an average of 4 to 7 days, the new passes are expected to be offered as either 1-day or 3-day passes priced at around $4 and $9 respectively. The unlimited subway passes will also be available for local residents. Today, August 22nd, is Energy Day in South Korea, and to mark the occasion, some of the country's key landmarks, including Gwanghwamun, Seoul N Tower, and the National Assembly Building, will have their lights switched off at 9 p.m. for 5 minutes. This year, the event is being hosted by the Citizens Association for Saving Energy to raise awareness about saving energy and the environmental impacts. Part of the campaign also included increasing air conditioner temperatures by 2 degrees from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. this afternoon. Combined, the association expects over 1.2 million people to participate as well, based on their pre-participation survey, saving almost 470 megawatt hours of electricity. This event is in its 20th year and has been held annually since 2003.
For the next few days, a powerful low-pressure system will drop frequent showers nationwide. As you can see, rain clouds are slowly moving in from the west of the country. By tomorrow morning, the entire nation will be covered. Therefore, until tomorrow, rain will be concentrated across western regions and Jeju Island. For northern Gyeonggi-do province and mountainous regions of Jeju Island, heavy downpours of up to 150 millimeters are expected. For Seoul and remainder of western central regions, up to 120 millimeters are in the forecast. Chungcheongdo and Jeollado province will see 30 to 80 millimeters. And local downpours of 30 to 60 millimeters per hour will lash some regions. The ground will get more saturated over time due to continuous rainfall. Be extra careful of landslides, and those across low-lying regions, flooding is also possible. Despite the cold rain, tropical nights will continue for some regions. Seoul and Daegu will be starting off at 25 degrees. As for the daily highs, Seoul will get up to 27, Gwangju 29, Gyeongju will be hot at 34 degrees. And long spells of showers are expected nationwide until Friday morning. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session is coming up.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Ireland, like Korea, is a very outward-facing country. Our peoples are curious about the world. Like Irish people, it matters to Koreans that your story is told well, that people understand your values, your culture, your perspectives. An important role in telling Korea's story to the world and to promoting the Korean brand. This fosters closer friendships between Korea and other countries and enables better cooperation. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
안녕하세요. 저희는 도시입니다.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Loved and watched around the world. We want to make more animations to reach more children. Traveling time and space. Developing adventure and curiosity. Infinite creativity and hope. We want our children to grow up to be happy. Animation, watched by children all around the world. so that joy can be felt when our animation is watched. This is the reason we make animation and share with the world. K-Animation, befriending children all over the world.
Hello everyone, it's Tuesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. The Camp David Trilateral Summit was not just a historic moment in enhancing security ties, but also a meeting that opened up a new chapter in economic security cooperation. Finance ministers will start holding meetings annually, and the three countries decided to launch an early warning system to prevent possible global supply chain disruptions. In addition, cooperation on critical and emerging technologies was included in their agreements. To take a closer look at the robust economic ties between the three countries that were agreed to through the recent summit, we have invited Professor Yang Jun-seok from the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Good evening. And we also have Jeff Moon, president of China Moon Strategies, LLC. Mr. Moon is also a former assistant U.S. trade representative for China. Good to see you, Mr. Moon.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
All right, good to have you with us. Now, allow me to give you first question, Mr. Moon. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo agreed to hold trilateral summits annually, as well as meetings between national security advisors and ministers. But what is noticeable is that they also decided to launch a trilateral finance ministers meeting for the first time. What significance does this have?
The decision to launch a trilateral finance ministers meeting reflects the broad ambition and, frankly, the courage of the leaders as they expand trilateral cooperation to a wide range of regional and global issues. The summit joint statement says that even as the three countries deepen their security partnership, they also want to maintain focus on building robust cooperation in the economic security and technology spheres to leverage the unique capabilities of each of the three countries. So during the bilateral meeting between Presidents Biden and Yoon, the two leaders also confirmed their desire to continue close collaboration to fortify and strengthen multiple commercial sectors. Increasing economic cooperation is impossible without extensive coordination between finance ministries, so it makes sense that the trilateral summit commitments include regular meetings of finance ministers.
All right, I see your point. Now, Professor Yang, the three leaders acknowledged the importance of deepening their existing trilateral economic security dialogue. Now, what role has this dialogue played up till now, and how is it expected to be enhanced?
Well, the economic security dialogue came out from the November 2022 meeting at Phnom Penh, the summit of U.S., Korea, and Japan, and the top-level economic security officials met for the first time in this summit in Honolulu, Hawaii in February. And they talked about critical and emerging technologies such as quantum and space technologies, increasing supply chain resilience for semiconductors, batteries, and critical minerals. And they also talked about data security, and how to protect technology and data from arising economic interdependence. So basically, I wouldn't say that it's a general economic meeting. It was very much concerned with economic security, high technology, data, and new emerging technologies. But it is a forum where they can discuss these new technologies and perhaps new standards and new regulations that will inevitably follow.
Right, I see. So it was first agreed at Phnom Penh, and soon we are going to witness how it is going to be enhanced. Now, Mr. Moon, as one of the ways to strengthen economic security ties, the leaders agreed to launch an early warning system to enhance cooperation on possible supply chain disruption. What exactly is this EWS?
This pilot early warning system will strengthen supply chain resilience by identifying priority products and materials, things like critical minerals and rechargeable batteries, and establishing mechanisms to rapidly share information and react to real or potential disruptions. This new trilateral system is designed to complement and to enhance the existing early warning system with the EU and the arrangement with Asian partners through the Indo-Pacific Economic Partnership, or IPEF, that's currently under active negotiation and could be announced by the end of this year. The IPEF negotiators announced in May that they had substantially concluded negotiations on an EWS that will include a supply chain council and a response network that will collaborate on sector-specific action plans for key sectors and goods, as well as an emergency communications channel enabling the 14 IPEF partners to more effectively respond to disruptions. So I expect that the EWS established at the Trilateral Summit is likely to include these and a variety of other features.
Right, I see. So it's basically to enhance the global supply chain resilience. Now, Professor Yang, with such a measure in place, media outlets say the most powerful economic bloc representing around 1/3 of the world economy has been launched, and that such a body might bring change to the global industrial and economic landscape. How do you see this?
Okay, well, U.S. is about 25% of global economy. Japan is about 6%. Korea is about 2%. So added together, that's about 1/3 of the economy. So they are right in that aspect. But it's not entirely clear to me whether this can be considered a new economic bloc. The three countries do not share a single FTA. Korea has a U.S.-Korea FTA, and Korea and Japan both belong to the Asian plus 6 trading bloc, trading FTA with China, but we do not share a single FTA. It could have happened with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but the United States withdrew, and they do not, at least for now, seem to be interested in getting back. So this summit talked about high-tech industries. It talked about new technologies. It talked about economic and security. It talked about finance, securities and international finance. It did not talk a lot about traditional economics. It did not talk about things like steel quota, which still Korea still has imposed. So I'm not sure if we can, at least for now, call this a new powerful economic bloc. What it definitely will do, though, is that because these are new industries and because these three countries are leading players in those new industries, that it might be easier to cooperate. It might be easier to share new standards, new regulations on things like AI or electric vehicles. So it can be very productive, but for now, at least, it seems to be very limited to the economic security aspect and new technologies and new industries.
Right. So though it could be beneficial for all of the three countries, it could be quite a stretch to call it as an economic bloc. But Mr. Moon, many experts say the semiconductor supply chain system is expected to benefit the most from this measure, as the three countries could complement each other. Is this really so?
Well, South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. all have prominent roles in the semiconductor industry, so there's a lot at stake here. The sector is unique because semiconductors are essential in modern life. The process for producing them is extremely complicated, and the supply chain is global, with no single country dominating all aspects. Enhancing supply chain coordination is critical because we've seen in recent years extreme shortages and gluts in semiconductor availability. Potential concerns and problems include both natural factors, such as COVID, as well as man-made obstacles, such as China's recent restrictions on critical minerals, such as gallium and germanium. So better coordination between nations that have leading roles in the field can only help to enhance resilience and prosperity.
All right, I see. Now, moving on to the trilateral cooperation on so-called the critical and emerging technology. Professor Yang, why is cooperation in these tech sectors so important, and how would this joint research programs look like?
Okay, well, typically, if you have joint projects like this, researchers all come together and there's a financing available so that these researchers can get together and collaborate on projects. There has been mentioned that national laboratories, national research institutes will be allowed to coordinate with each other and research with each other. So that is something that I think is very exciting. Having said that, why is this important? Well, because these are new industries and standards and regulations are just being started out. Say, taking things like, say, AI, AI needs to learn from existing material that are in the internet. You have a strike out in Hollywood right now arguing about some of these very issues, whether the AI can learn from these materials without paying any compensation to people who have created them already. Do you have rights to, say, your appearance? Do you have rights to works when AI collaborates? All of these will be very important for economic development in the future, and a lot will depend on what kind of rules and regulations are set right now. Traditionally, because Korea was a follower, we didn't really have a lot of voice in setting these global regulations, global standards, but this tripartite framework that they develop now, I believe, can play a role in setting these standards for the future, and Korea will have a major voice in it.
Right, sounds exciting. But developing these new technologies is of course important, but what's also important is to protect them, right? So Mr. Moon, in order to protect technologies from being illegally exported or stolen, the three countries will begin exchanges between U.S. disruptive technology strike force and its Korean and Japanese counterparts. Now, why did the U.S. create such a task force, and how is such cooperation expected to go?
The U.S. Justice and Commerce Departments announced last February the creation of the Disruptive Technology Task Force, and the idea was to pool the resources of various agencies in the fight against persistent efforts by some countries to steal advanced technologies and use them illegally for commercial or military purposes. So the task force focuses on about a dozen American metropolitan areas. It includes U.S. attorneys, Commerce Department export control officers, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security. Both South Korea and Japan face similar challenges involving technology theft, and there are cases involving technology theft in both of those countries. So the decision of the leaders at the Trilateral Summit to work together in response to this problem, I think, is a welcome step that will benefit all three countries as they try to protect advanced technologies.
Right, a welcoming step. But Mr. Moon, many of the agreements seem to me it is an attempt to bolster ties against China's so-called economic coercion. What's your view on this?
South Korea, Japan, and the United States are all well aware of Chinese economic coercion. I'm sure viewers in South Korea remember, for example, the punishing boycotts China launched against South Korea in 2017 when Seoul wanted to defend itself by deploying THAAD missiles. China has increasingly resorted to economic coercion in recent years to defend real or perceived interests. So countries in Asia and Europe want to share cooperation, share information, and push back. So I just think that the Trilateral Summit announcement in this regard is just the latest development in that trend.
Right, I see. But Mr. Moon, just before the Trilateral Summit, China gave the green light to resume group tours to 78 countries, including South Korea, for the first time in 6 years. Now, what does such a move suggest?
Well, I think there could be a couple of factors at play. First of all, China's middle class wants to have opportunities to travel abroad, and the Chinese government ought to give them those opportunities. Second, if you look at this from a more cynical perspective, suspending foreign travel and cutting off tourist revenue for other countries has traditionally been one of the common forms of Chinese economic coercion, and that has happened in the case of Korea as well. So by permitting tourist travel to resume, China simply regains a retaliatory option that it lost during the pandemic and will now be able to use whenever convenient. So the answer is it depends how you look at it.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Yang, what the discussions did not include was any mention of the Inflation Reduction Act or the release of Fukushima wastewater. Since we are focusing on economic issues right now, let's look at the IRA. August 16th marked 1 year since the IRA was signed into law. Now, what impact did it have on South Korean EV makers since then?
Well, not much. A lot of the fears that we had last year were not realized. First of all, the electric vehicle exports, they actually rose somewhat. If you take the U.S. import figures, imports of EVs from Korea actually went up compared to September 2021 to August 2022, it was $1.9 billion. September 22 to August 2023, it was $3.2 billion. So the exports of electric vehicles actually rose quite a bit, and that's because the Biden administration ruled that while for consumer purchases of vehicles, you needed vehicles to be produced, assembled in North America. For commercial vehicles, they would still get the subsidies even if the vehicle was not assembled in North America. So Korea has been rebalancing its exports more toward vehicles for leasing rather than vehicles that are sold to consumers. And then for EV batteries, the total battery exports rose slightly. You can argue that perhaps it did not rise as much as it could have. But on the other hand, for cathodes, which is a part used in batteries, that rose significantly. Overall, exports rose by about 67%, and exports of cathodes to the United States rose about 178%. And that's because the U.S. Department of Commerce ruled that the cathodes will not be counted on whether the batteries were made in the United States or North America or not. So Korean made cathodes can be used in American assembled batteries and be still counted as an American. So we have seen a really incredible increase in cathode exports. So at least for now, a lot of the fears that we may have about electric vehicle exports declining, electric vehicle battery industry being affected, that has not really taken place. So Korea is, in some sense, over-worried, at least so far.
All right, I see. I mean, it's good to hear that there wasn't much of an impact on South Korean EV makers, but Professor Yang, concerns exist as Korean battery makers still heavily depend on China for around 90% of core minerals such as lithium hydroxide. Will South Korea be able to reduce this risk?
Well, it entirely depends on whether we can get alternate sources. The reason that we get it from China is because, first, they're close. Second, they are major producers. And third, it's cheap. Now, can we get the same conditions elsewhere? There is a lot of doubt. While China is not the only source for these rare materials, usually China is the easiest source to get it because other countries, either it is very expensive to mine them or they have environmental regulations which makes mining of these rare earths very difficult. So will Korea get affected? Well, if we can find alternate sources, and this is one of the things that the supply chain security aspect of this tripartite meeting is supposed to do, but can we get it as cheaply? That I have some questions on.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Moon, overall, South Korea is making a clear and decisive preference for the U.S. over China in both security and economic aspects. But as we have talked about it earlier, South Korea is not in a position to overlook economic ties with China. And so, in what direction should Seoul go in terms of economic ties with Beijing?
Well, Biden administration officials have commented that the U.S. has enjoyed many decades of cooperation separately with both South Korea and Japan. And the only thing that's changed at the summit was that bilateral cooperation has expanded to become trilateral cooperation. In addition, that cooperation is not targeted at anyone else, but rather is intended to advance a common, positive vision of an Indo-Pacific region that's free, open, secure, and prosperous. That affirmative trilateral agenda does not prevent South Korea from maintaining economic relations with China. In fact, China used to be South Korea's largest export market until recently, when the U.S. replaced China in that regard. The South Korean government has done a good job, I think, of balancing relations with China against relations with market economies, and I expect it's going to continue to do so.
Right, I see. Well, Professor Yang, I'd like to ask you this same question as well. How should Seoul maintain economic ties with Beijing?
Well, I think we are never going to have a case where China is not Korea's major trading partner. Usually trade volume depends on economic size and distance, and China is one of the two largest economies, and it's located virtually right next door. The problem is whether Korea whether Korea is over-dependent on China, because it's such an easy market for Korean companies to develop. And I think the last few years have shown us that perhaps we become too over-dependent on China, that whenever we have problems with China, both politically or economically, that affects Korea perhaps too much. So we need a bit of a distance between Korea and China, and I think this is one way of getting it, but can we ever eliminate China as a major trading partner? I don't think so.
Right, I see. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Yang and Mr. Moon, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.